All right, we're going to move on to key topic 6, miscellaneous rules and regulations. Okay, most of the regulations that we deal with the FCC is under Part 80. You can see under Title 47 of the U.S. Code, they have telecommunications. Well, it's actually the numbering is the same. The U.S. Code is what the Congress passes, and the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, is basically follows the same numbering, but that's what's in effect approved by the various agencies, like the FCC Chapter 1. Subchapter D, Safety and Special Radio Services, which is mostly Part 80. Then you can see a number of the headings here. General information. We've already looked at some of this. Applications and licensing, operating requirements. As we get down further, we're going to see the public coast stations. All right, so just basically, I just want to give you an overview of that. And the question is, what regulations govern the use and operation of FCC licensed ship stations in international waters? Let's see if my polls work. No polls or quizzes were created. Well, since it's just you, I'm not going to run a poll.
I'm gonna say B.
B, yes, Part 80, since that's what I flashed up on the screen. But basically, the question does say you're an FCC licensed ship, but you're traveling in international waters. So do you still have to abide by the FCC, or do you switch over to one of these international groups? Like A says the International Maritime Organization, and C talks about the International Telecommunications Union. But you're correct. It would still be Part 80, which specifies the operating procedures, technical standards, safety watch requirements, emission classes, transmitter power, transmitter licensing, frequency and tolerances, and more. These rules must be followed by all FCC licensed ship stations wherever they travel in the world. And as we continue to look at the various regulations, this one here on the screen, basically control by the operator. Basically, the operator of the equipment is in charge of controlling their equipment, and other people really should keep their hands off it. But this one does show one of the exceptions. The operator on board ships required to have a holder of a commercial operator license or permit on board may, if authorized by the station licensee or master, permit an unlicensed person to modulate the transmitting apparatus for all modes of communication except Morse code radio telegraphy. So basically, you can allow somebody that is not licensed as long as you are, I suppose, there. Doesn't really say that though, does it? Well, let's see what the question is. The question is, when may an operator of a ship radio station allow an unlicensed person to speak over the transmitter? And the options are at no time. B, when the station power does not exceed 200 watts, PEP. C, when under the supervision of the licensed operator, which so far looks like the best answer. Or D, during the hours that the radio officer is normally off duty. So yes, I am too. So under the supervision of the licensed operator. So in some cases, a telephone call might be made from ship to shore. The passenger might want to call home. The passenger does not own the station license. Therefore, the station operator supervises the communication to keep it legal. And apparently you do that just like any other phone call. This one's a little tricky here. They're talking about compulsory ship inspections. Under some cases, you do have to have your radio equipment inspected. Ordinarily, these days, that is done by one of those more advanced licenses, like the maintainer license. But let's see what I have down here. So the regulation says inspection of ships subject to the Communications Act or the Safety Convention. 1. The FCC will not normally conduct the required inspections of ships subject to the inspection requirements of the Act or the Convention. And then there's a note here. Nothing in this section prohibits the commission inspectors from inspecting ships. And I think that's what they're hanging their hat on, this particular answer. But these days, the mandatory inspection of U.S. vessels must be conducted by an FCC licensed technician holding either the Element 3 GROL or the higher GMDSS license. And then there's a few other first and second class certificates. I did put down the actual history of this regulation, and you can see it's been amended a number of times. It started out in 1986, amended in 91, 95, 96, all the way up to 2020. So this, for some reason, is one of the regulations that is frequently amended. Most of the other ones that we've looked at are not amended that often. The reason I put that up is because this question here, I think, is relying on an older version. So we'll discuss that a little bit. I think here's the question. Where do you make an application for inspection of a ship's GMDSS radio station? Where would you actually make an application? And the options are to a colum, a COLEM, which is basically the person that gives you the test. So we're going to have in our testing department, we do have one on campus. And basically the only thing that they do is they give the test. They don't actually go out and inspect the licenses. They're kind of like the proctor of the test. And then they actually send in the results to the FCC, who then mails you your license. So that's not exactly what they do. They don't inspect the ship, and you don't talk to them about it. B, to the FCC in Washington, D.C., the national headquarters? Probably not. C, to the engineer in charge of the FCC district office or the proposed place of inspection. Now, I suppose if you are going to make an application, and if you do it to the district office of the FCC, I think that's one of the early iterations of the regulation. D, to an FCC licensed technician holding the GMDSS radio maintainer's license, which is actually what we do these days. But apparently the answer is to the engineer in charge of the district office. The explanation does say that the application begins with the FCC engineer in charge, EIC, of the FCC district office that is nearest the proposed place for the ship's inspection. Start with the FCC district office. This is the correct answer for this exam. And I think I do go one step further and do point out that, all right, I found this somewhere else. Recently, the FCC has made ship owners responsible for this annual inspection by requiring them to arrange their own inspections using local FCC licensed technicians who hold the required maintainer license. Since the FCC is still in the loop, go with answer C, the FCC engineer in charge, but know that a commission requests going direct to a licensed technician, which helps reduce the workload at the FCC district office. So apparently this has been discussed because nobody liked the answer, which is the second one that we're stumbling across where we feel the official answer isn't exactly the right answer. But in this case, I suppose at least you'll know the difference. But for passing the test, you're probably better off going with answer C, even though the correct answer is probably D. Although you don't really make application to the technician, you schedule an appointment. So that one, who knows? The service of each ship station must be at all times be under the ultimate control of the master, who must require that each operator or such station comply with the radio regulations in force, and that the ship station is used in accordance with those regulations. So basically, the ultimate control of the ship station, which is the radio station, not the whole ship, is with this character called the master. And unfortunately, by talking about it so much, I'm kind of giving away the next question here. Who has ultimate control of service at a ship's radio station? And you can see A is the master of the ship. And there's going to be a number of other options, which I think just by talking about it for the last few minutes, we're going to say that the answer is the master of the ship. The master of the ship, usually the owner or captain of the vessel, owns the station license and enjoys ultimate authority on the air. He is permitted to designate a qualified operator to handle radio messages. So, I mean, some of the wordage should be updated, and I'm sure it will be. It's probably in progress now. But if this question appears on your test, the correct answer is going to be A. Another regulation about the radio telephone station. It must be installed to ensure safe and effective operation of the equipment and to facilitate repair. It also should be mounted so that it minimizes exposure to moisture or vibration. D, the principal operating position of the radio telephone station must be in the room from which the ship is normally steered while at sea. In installations on cargo ships, the location of the principal operating controls may be in a room adjoining and opening into the room from which the vessel is normally steered while at sea. So they want it pretty close to the big wheel that they use to steer the ships. What? It's got a word, I'm sure. The question is, where must the principal radio telephone operating position be installed in a ship station? I think we're flying through this, so I'm not going to worry about the poll. I'll do it in between the two sections. But the options are, this is where should the radio be on a ship? A, at the principal radio operating position of the vessel. B, in the chart room, master's quarters, or the wheelhouse. C, in the room or an adjoining room from which the ship is normally steered while at sea. Or D, at the level of the main wheelhouse, or at least one deck above the ship's main deck. They're pretty good at writing all these wrong answers. I've gotten pretty good at it myself. All right, so basically we just covered that, and you're starting to say C. Yeah. Yes, it is in the room or the adjoining room. That's in order to assure that the person in command receives correct and timely information. So there's a message comes in on the radio. You don't want to have to run to the other side of the ship to give it. You basically open the door or just talk to the person who's in the same room with you. Iceberg ahead, something like that. It makes sense to keep the radio close to the steering room at all times, particularly in a busy shipping channel or at sea during a rough storm. We briefly talked about the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, which was kind of a big deal. It was a convention, and anytime you get a bunch of countries to agree to something, it usually kind of is a big deal. And if you're talking about the high seas, where there really is no country, if you're close to a shore, you're probably part of their waters. But once you get a little further away from shore, it's the law of the open sea, and there is a whole area of law called maritime law, which is probably more popular in the 1940s than it is these days. But Chapter 4 of that convention does cover the radio communications. It basically incorporates the global maritime distress and safety system and states that all passenger ships and all cargo ships of 300 gross tonnage and upwards on international voyages are required to carry equipment designed to improve the chances of rescue following an accident. And that includes satellite emergency position indicating radio beacons, or the EPIRBs, and the search and rescue transponders, the SARTs, for the location of the ship or the survival craft. And we do look at the transponders. 300 gross tonnage, you might know that there are 2,000 pounds in a ton. So if you extrapolate that, it would be 600,000 pound ships, which is kind of amazing that you can put that much tonnage on the water and it actually floats. But that's our designs. And actually, it doesn't take much to actually hit 300 gross tonnage. Regulations in Chapter 4 cover undertakings by contracting governments to provide radio communication services, as well as ship requirements for carriage of specific types of equipment. All right, let's see what we're doing about that. We do have a regulation. This subpart covers all the GMDSS rules. Every ship that is subject to that act or the safety convention must comply with this subpart. And what ships is this applicable to? The regulations contained within this subpart apply to all passenger ships, regardless of size, and cargo ships of the 300 gross tonnage and upwards. So basically, it has been the requirements of the convention have been codified into the FCC regulations. Question is, by international agreement, which ships must carry radio equipment for the safety of life at sea? And just scanning through there, you can see a number of numbers. You can see 100 a few times, and then D does have the 300 gross tons in there, so I'm already attracted to that answer. But let's see what the other ones say. A, all ships traveling more than 100 miles out to sea. B, cargo ships of more than 100 gross tons, and passenger vessels on international deep sea voyages. Basically, the regulation doesn't say that about either one. It does talk about D. Now, it does say all passenger ships, and I guess that if you read the small print, it's ones that carry over 12 passengers, which if it's going to be a passenger ship, it probably does carry more than that. That's going to be a rule that you see with aircraft. If you are like less than 9 passengers, you have a whole other set of relaxed rules. Once you hit over 9, you have the higher rules for aircraft. Now that doesn't include the pilot or co-pilot, so technically you have 11 in there, and you're still in compliance with the commuter type rules. So we're going to go ahead and answer D on this one. Passenger ships can be in danger at a moment's notice. Doesn't make me want to jump on a ship.
Yeah, the ocean's dangerous.
Yeah.
You just get struck by a meteor or something in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and you're just kind of floating around in the salt water. That's not the way I want to go. As the sharks are circling you. Yeah, that's a dangerous place. All right, so that's gonna be that one.